Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Thunder, and this is Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. And we've got another productivity-oriented, level up, skills and resources, boss up, office politics, get your money episode of Getting Ish Done. And over the last few weeks, we've been covering topics like how to know when to leave a job, how to start a new job, and today's show is going to be about refining your negotiation skills. And in particular, we're taking a look at a valuetainment video by the name of 14 Common Negotiation Mistakes, because we want to alert you to the mistakes that you could be making that are jacking you up. Somebody says my gain is crunchy. I'm not sure what that means exactly. Am I pagan? Is it distorted? Is that what you're saying? Put a 1 in the chat if the audio is nice and clear. You said it's a bit distorted. 1 second here. Let me see if I can. Oh, yeah, it is distorted. Check. Should be better. Should be getting better now. Check. It's also way softer. Not sure how to fix that. Okay, let me try this. 1 second. Check. Check. Is that still clear? Am I still coming through clear? Nice and clear? All right. I trust that it's clear. But we've been covering a number of topics that will be particularly useful for people changing jobs, transitioning between this job and that job, knowing when it's the appropriate time to get out of there. And, of course, today's episode, common mistakes in negotiations. We're looking again at a valuetainment video, and that valuetainment video is called 14 Common Negotiation Mistakes. Let's go. Warning: some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is. All right. What's happening, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. How about yourself this beautiful Wednesday evening?
I'm doing okay. Is my mic sounding better?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. It's pretty good. You can dial it in later, but I think for
Yeah.
it'll work for the broadcast.
All right. Yeah. It's just like something all of a sudden just started giving me some issues for some weird reason. I'm not sure what it is. So so anyhow, um, we've been talking. I was saying in the monologue, I was saying a little bit about some of the kinds of topics that we've been covering lately. You want to say a few words about that?
Few words about the kind of topics we've been covering lately. I think those, uh, like last week, for example, or the past couple of weeks when we looked at the job thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, Overall, something that I think that it's like a little bit of a remedial course. Like, okay, let's go back and touch upon some basics, right? Let's, in terms of preparation and whatnot. I think that, for example, this, which is negotiation, is not only, of course, ubiquitously important, but also might be a deeper level course. I haven't seen the video, it's a live reaction, right? But it seems like, well, negotiation, especially if it's coming from valuetainment, might have some little granules in there. Now it's 14, which is, and this is my usual thing is to harp on that. But generally speaking, it's not just to pick on people. It's, well, I do kind of have a passion for, let's say, teaching or encapsulating information in certain ways and delivering it. And giving people long lists of things is not the way to do stuff. Because no matter how long the list may be, you create little bags for it. You say, okay, this is category A types of mistake, and this is category B type of mistake, right? And seven and seven in each. I don't have to remember all seven. I just remember a general category, oh, things that you say and then things you do not say, like something like that, right? And then so it can help. But 14 assumes you're an expert, and it's like 14 basically assumes you have a whole model. And I'm just going to point to all these corners of your model, right? Like, you know how the whole machine works, and I'm just going to start tweaking all kinds of little corners. That's what 14, all these long lists seem like to me, as opposed to, hey, it's just really two categories that start from there, and then we can fill in the details later. But anyways, those are my kind of opening thoughts, if you will.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Like, share, comment, subscribe, become a channel member where you'll get access to all archived videos, support black male media, support independent media, super chats enabled, super thanks for the Replay Gang, Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Dr. Thunder Music, all one word, spell out the word doctor. If you'd like to buy me a sandwich, shoot me a Cash App, Sandwich Gang. And if you didn't know it, sandwich is spelled with two M's. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Listen, no matter what you do in life, you're always negotiating. Whether you're dealing with your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, kids, boss, parents, family, cousins, it doesn't matter. You're always negotiating. So the sooner you become a better negotiator and learn the mistakes you're making, the better of results you'll start getting when it comes down to negotiating. So today, I'm going to talk to you about the 14 common mistakes people make when it comes down to negotiating. Now, there's a lot more out there. I'm just giving you 14 of them. Number one, letting your emotions get in the way when you're negotiating. Let me explain what I mean by this. It doesn't matter what it is. If a parent goes to school and is talking to a principal because their kid did something wrong, the parent always thinks their kids are perfect and they don't make mistakes because it's their product. The same when you're selling a house to somebody else, you always think your house is worth more than it really is because it's your house. You've been living in it for 8 years, 9 years. The market would generally tell you what your house is worth, what your car is worth, whatever you're selling. So you got to figure out a way to put yourself out of the situation and kind of be a consultant looking in instead of being somebody that's an involved involved emotionally in it, where you don't typically end up negotiating the proper way. So you can't let your emotions get into you, especially if the other person says, I think this thing's only worth $4,000. You think it's $10,000, you're absolutely furious. You may lose a deal there, and you got to kind of figure out a way on what it is. Number two, misinterpretation of.
All right. So what did you think of
That's
that first one?
well, it's a good one. Now, emotions. What underlies this number one mistake is do not lose control, right? So there are obvious ways in which emotions can be used in a controlled way. You know, you could make a speech and shed a tear like Bill Clinton on cue, all right?
Oh
You,
no.
you can make your lips quiver even, and if it serves your ends, but you are in control is the important part, right? So do not get out of control. But how do you prevent that? It's like almost saying, well, don't be a baby, don't be in your feelings and all that kind of stuff. But when we're talking about things like this or in anything, the way you avoid that is by practice or training, or shall I say preparation. Okay. So understanding, for example, like to use emotions, right? Let's say you were going there where you're actually using emotions, and but you're not going to get out of control. That is master level understanding of influencing or persuasion and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but if we just take a step back into what he said about taking yourself out of the situation, looking at it from the other person's point of view, from the consumer's point of view, from the market's point of view, from the point of view of the person across the room from you, right? Understanding that they're going to come with some things that you disagree with, and having your emotions ready to do that. Overall, so I said preparation, and how do you prepare your emotions? You can do role playing. Salespeople do this all the time. Basically, you got somebody, they're playing the client, and you're playing your salesperson. They come in, they try to stonewall you. You come in, you try to blah blah blah. And the more you do that, the more you're going to understand certain types of things and cues and develop these types of skills so that you do not lose control. But anyways, loss of control. What do you think?
Yeah. Losing control is never a good idea. I'm a fan of stoicism. Um, and when you start to feel like you're getting out of control, then probably saying less is better.
Mhm.
You may try to find an excuse to leave the room for a period of time without it being obvious that you're leaving because you're ticked off. I need to get some water. I need to go to the restroom. Any of those kinds of things. Fake a phone call. I've got to take this call because it could be an emergency, whatever. But anything so that you don't look like you're, visibly upset. Yeah, and once you get beyond a certain point, it's hard to sort of get the genie back in the bottle, as it were. So you're going to destroy everything. So yeah, stay under control, stay measured, stay balanced. Recognize that it's not the end of the world. It's not that serious. And frankly, often is the case that people they may not know how to evaluate something. That example that he used, it's up to you to convince them of the value of what it is you're trying to sell them.
Mhm.
So if they don't have the correct understanding of what the value is, rather than getting upset, show them what the value is. So that's my thought.
Yep. Let's see what he's got next.
Interpretation of position. This interpretation of position. This is deal there, and you got to kind of figure out a way on what it is. Number two, misinterpretation of position. This is very important because sometimes you're talking to somebody and they say something and you get upset. They didn't mean what you thought they meant. So instead of getting upset, Ask 2 or 3 or 4 more questions, probing questions, to ask them what they mean by this. Do you mean this? Do you mean this? Not, that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying this because of this. Oh, I didn't even think about that. Okay, no problem. So a lot of times deals don't go through because there's not enough questions being asked because the two parties negotiating misinterpreted each other, right? So you got to make sure you get a lot more questions there so this doesn't happen. Number 3.
No, that of course that's like number 1 again.
Yeah, so he brings in a particular kind of instance of where you could be triggered, right? You're triggered because you misunderstood what somebody said and then you got angry. Now, however, there is there's different principle that could be extracted here in general about understanding the position of other people. Okay. Now, a lot of times in, negotiations, it's a question of being able to frame the other person's position in terms that are favorable to you. Now, this is not always easy. The person may have a very well defined and hard position that you cannot kind of redefine for him through your snake charm, thing. But if the person, let's say for example, not to get too deep with this here, but I 100% agree that he took it in the way of, okay, here's something that could upset you, and then it just goes back to number 1 again. But on this idea of really understanding the position of the other person, there is just kind of simple logical understanding of somebody says A and you thought it was B and okay, but it's A. That's kind of a simple like misinterpretation type stuff. But in human communication, right, there is always, okay, especially in sales and stuff, there is always something not said about somebody's position. They're not going to give you something that makes them vulnerable. That's always the case. They're not going to tell you how desperate they are. For example, okay, someone's trying to sell you their business. It's not in their position to tell you that, oh, actually, it's because my wife has stage 3 cancer and we don't know how to pay the bills and my son doesn't want to freaking inherit the thing. He's a drug junkie anyways. That's why this business is on the line, blah, 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 that kind of a thing, right? So, but he's just going to tell you, oh, it's because it's blah, X, Y, Z, and I think it's worth this, right? So you can always repackage or get closer to the what's the actual underlying reason. It may be, oh, this guy needs to, he's just tired and he needs to be able to envision himself kind of relaxing at the beach. So you dictate terms of the sale of this business such that you're painting the picture of, hey, maybe it's like, okay, you want it to be, and it doesn't really matter the particular, the minutia of the jargon I'm about to say. You want it to be owner financed so that, because that's beneficial to you, but you paint the picture of how he doesn't have to worry about X, Y, and Z because he's owner financing it, and he gets these monthly stuff, payments from the bank and X, Y, Z, and he does not. You paint something that takes it away from the terms of just hard numbers and such into the kind of future that someone is trying to put themselves in. People are always trying to put themselves into a particular kind of future, right? A future without the pain in the ass that this business is, or a future where I can get to spend this money that or you get what I'm saying? It's not just some kind of, we're not computers where it's like, oh, I just want to do this transaction, like, no, there's some kind of a future you're trying to get into, a future with the new Maytag machine where it's better and it's stainless steel and you feel good about your kitchen again, right? It's not about the Maytag or the 7 BTUs and all that kind of stuff. So to be able to reframe, A, understand their position, B, reframe it in terms that are favorable to you and give them the warm and fuzzies is always a good skill to have. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Um, when I was looking for, and this time I was looking for specifically for a video that was about negotiation, or screwing up a deal, or preventing from screwing up a deal, or here's how you land a deal, whatever. I was looking for a video like that when I found this video. And one of the videos I looked at was, what is it, the Harvard approach or whatever? And they go through these different styles of sort of conflict resolution. So there's win-win, there's win-lose, there's compromise, there's lose-win, and then there is lose-lose. And, it's kind of silly. And it reminds me of an Office episode where he's reading directly out of this manual about how to solve a conflict. Two of the employees had an issue, and he's reading some stuff out of the manual. And then eventually stuff gets out of hand, and then he does something, and he tells them that he had to use win-lose on them. he,
Hey,
he had to use win-lose on them.
it's the strategy that was called for. That,
Oh
that's the play.
goodness!
You have to do
So
it.
that's funny, but the whole point there was to try to come up with a style or a version that prevents compromise. You don't want to compromise. You want a win-win. And part of it is about how you frame it, how you talk about it. One of the things that they were suggesting is this thing about not trying to settle too soon. Like if you come up with a solution too soon, then that can kind of ruin the deal. Because sometimes people like, why are you so eager to, to get this happening? Is there something I don't know? But also it inherently is going to cause you to overlook, some things. You're going to miss some things if you're trying to do it so quickly. And it's much more likely if you try to come to a conclusion or a solution too soon, it's much more likely that you'll end up with a compromise rather than a win-win. So I just thought that was
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
that thing about knowing not to speed up a deal. So yes, the compromise is one thing. I think it was an example that somebody gave recently. I was listening to something and talking about, well, you might force somebody into a deal. They might buy maybe one thing from you, right? Now, I'm just going to change this deal now into something where you're kind of like you have a business, or you're trying to sell somebody something, right? Um, you're trying to, and in this case, there is a short-term single transaction, or you could create a long-term or a big deal out of it. Typically, what people try to do is, if they push, they end up getting just one transaction or a simple thing. And the story that somebody was talking about was, trying to pitch this particular guy, and then the guy kind of backing, saying, whatever. But he kept him in mind. He didn't say, oh, move on to the next, right? You put him back in the rotation. You put him back into the follow-up program. You got your follow-up program, whatever it is, an email every whatever, a touch base, oh, I'm flying into town and just wanted to pass by and shake your hand, whatever your rotation, follow-up program is. You put him in there rather than give up on him. Eventually, the guy ended up buying and investing in a massive chunk of the guy's business. Like, rather than buy the $50 product, he ended up investing like $500,000 in his whole set of businesses, right? So he was chasing this guy, but the guy hadn't seen the right product yet, the right kind of way of partnering with this other person yet. But he kept him, okay, let me keep this guy on the rotation. Let me not end it, right? So basically what I'm saying is, one way, of course, is to go too quickly is to end up with a compromised deal. Another way is to just kind of say, oh, I'm going to write this person off, or not see that there might be a bigger picture at some point. Just wanted to add some little texture there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I like the part of it when you're saying, like, if you just want to sell them one sandwich, then, okay, maybe compromise is not the worst thing. But if really you're trying to keep them on the hook for a lot of stuff, and you want to maintain a relationship, that's when go ahead and slow walk the negotiation, because you're going to lose more by rushing it. I like that part of it. Plus, it gave me a chance to say sandwich. So, all right, let's keep going.
Research, research, research. Do as much research as you can. Let me give you a story here. We had a case where somebody contacted us. They wanted me to be in this documentary. And this documentary is going to have a Buddha in it and Tony Robbins, all this stuff, and sounded so fancy. And we want you to be an associate producer. And we're sitting there saying, wow, this is pretty exciting. So this is something maybe we'll entertain, want to be a part of. Until we found out that the executive producer that was a part of it had a major scandal, New York Times type of scandal that he was dealing with, from a relationship with a younger girl, all this other stuff. The moment we found that out, we backed and we said, we're not even doing any business with this. We almost did because we didn't do research. So one of the things I want to tell you is this video is sponsored by Fiverr. And one of the things I love that Fiverr does, Fiverr offers a service where people will literally research any topic you want for you. They'll research any topic for you. So if you have a topic to say, hey, I'm getting ready to negotiate with this company, what can you find out about this company here? What can you find out about the real estate market today? What can you find out about Bitcoin today? What can you find out about such and such today? Somebody will sit there and they'll research for you. And typically you can find out who does a better job. I normally recommend choosing 3 people if you really want some solid research. I'd rather pay 3 different people $50 a pop than use one person, because I can figure out which one's doing a better research. Then I'll go use that other person. So if you've never used Fiverr before, go try this service out. You can always go out there right now, have a relationship with them. If you use the coupon code PATBET, you will get a 20% discount. So if it's $150, 20%, $30 off. So be sure to go use that service on researching for yourself on any topic you want to do. Number 4, go into the source. I like to go to the source.
So that was about the most organic plug that I've seen.
It's good. Oh yeah, it's not bad. Like, I try to find reasons to hate Patrick Bet-David, of which there might be a few, but he is definitely good at the main thing that he does, which is the sales thing. Right? He's pretty good.
So the research thing. So what do you think about the research thing? I mean, he saved himself from a potential major headache, and maybe something that he'd want to back out from or would regret by just doing that research. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, like, the example of in terms of the danger or the kinds of ways you can be bit in the butt by not doing your research, I think his example is valid. But in general, the idea of doing your research is something that comes up over and over and over again, whether you're going to be arguing in court or you're selling, whatever it is to whomever it is. Now, and you have to know, a couple of things come to mind. So you go to these people's LinkedIn, you see them beforehand, you kind of like see what they're kind of into a little bit. There are people who go to when they even they show up at somebody's office and they're looking at the trinket, the little tchotchke things on their desk or what they have hanging on their wall. Oh, he's a baseball guy, right? So I'm getting out to some nitty-gritty things about knowing, quote unquote, your opposition, or knowing who's on the other side of a person on the other side of you, and then seeing what you can use. Now, not everybody can use the baseball knowledge, right? For example, some people are not into creating small talk, or maybe you're not into baseball and you can fake being into baseball, okay? So I'm not saying that every piece of intel that you get on somebody is relevant to what you're going to do, but this gets into the other thing about teamwork, okay? So you show up to negotiate and you're there maybe with your assistant / wife or an actual assistant, whatever it is, somebody else that maybe balances out, where they're researching the person's little family and baseball, and they can do the crazy small talk about that stuff. You research what you can use in your favor. And it may be certain things about the operations of the person's business the last time they made a transaction such as this. All those other kinds of things that maybe you are more in that realm of being able to piece out a puzzle together or psychologically kind of game somebody by having knowledge about them that they don't have about you. But it's not of the small talk variety, right? So this is very always important. The more you know, generally the better. But one misinterpretation people tend to have is, oh, do you mean I have to know about the guy's puppies and stuff like that? It's like, no, that might not be your forte. It's helpful if you have somebody to do that. But guess what? Here's another last little bit on that. Not only you have to consider, well, is knowing about the guy's baseball and using and talking about baseball and kind of stuff, is it my thing? Also, you have to know if it's actually his thing, because there's some people who don't want to share their whatever with you, right? They don't want you to ask them about their family, right? And you can also find out about that by research. Like you can figure out people's personalities not even from their LinkedIn profile. It's not so hard to figure it out, right? A little LinkedIn, a little Facebook. If this guy has vacation photos all over the freaking place, you already know the kind of guy he is, right?
Right.
You can kind of make some kinds of assumptions. Okay, so that's kind of like my thing on that. Research, always important. Researching on the person's information so that you can use it in different ways, always important. There is that whole warmth, extroverted, what we always call extroverted feeling um, game. Let me talk about how your daughter is really cute. You look at the picture, like, oh, she's great. Oh, they're all so stubborn when they're around 5 years old, and you start going on a tangent about raising kids. That might not be your forte, but you still have to research. Okay, it's crazy how many people don't think about a negotiation or a call or a conversation that they're gonna have where they're looking for a particular outcome before they do it. They might just, I'm just gonna wing it, just gonna wing it. Like I don't believe in winging it. I think it's rather inefficient. Even if you're the person again whom is a winger is always better if they have some cards beforehand. I mean, why wouldn't you want to have something? You're just lazy at that point if you're like, oh, because I'm good at winging stuff in real time, I'm just not gonna look at anything beforehand. You're insane.
Yeah. 100%. That Fiverr, the Fiverr suggestion was a good reason I said that was about the most organic plug I've heard, is that Fiverr, using that for research, that's a good idea. That's quite a good idea. So if you don't have time, that's no excuse for not having the information. That's another way to say what he just said. Let's keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a long time ago when I was getting contracts with insurance companies, and I was constantly talking to all these VPs, vice presidents. Oh yeah, we'll try to get a deal for you. Oh yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't think we heard the. Here we go.
So be sure to go use that service on researching for yourself on any topic you want to do. Number 4, going to the source. I like to go to the source. I remember a long time ago when I was getting contracts with insurance companies, and I was constantly talking to all these VPs, vice presidents. Oh yeah, we'll try to get a deal for you. Oh yeah, we'll try to get a deal for you. And then all of a sudden I said, you know what? I'm going straight to the source. I found that every insurance company CEOs, I found that all of these guys are human beings like you and I. They have a LinkedIn, they have a contact information, they know people that have information that I know, so I reached out to them. Eventually I got a hold of these CEOs. Direct phone. I spoke to them, I said, listen, here's who I am, here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a contract, I just started a company, I like your company, when can we get together and talk? Can you come here tomorrow? Yes, I flew to Chicago, struck up a deal with a CEO, came back, we had an insurance company to work with because I went directly to the source. Many times you got to go straight to the source. Number 5, leverage.
Yeah, I like that one. I may have
Go ahead.
used that one a few
Why do
times.
you like it? You've used it a couple of times.
Yeah, and we've said in the past, one of the other episodes, we've said that a lot of these companies, they'll set certain like protocols and rules, and a high percentage of people follow those rules, but that also tends to mean that they're going to stay stuck where they are. it's these sort of climbers. They sort of, they don't want to look like they're belligerent, and they just don't care, and they're like rebels or something. You don't want to come off that way, but they're constantly like asking for forgiveness instead of forgiveness. I'm sorry, forgiveness instead of permission. And that's what this kind of sounds like, because all of these companies have like the way that they want you to contact them. Go through the portal on the website, email, blah, 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 do all of this kind of stuff. Okay. That stuff, I mean, for folks that are actually good at what they do, it's not effective. You know how many freaking thousands of emails get sent that way? There's no way you're gonna actually get to somebody. And I know a lot of folks, and I have connects with a lot of folks that are manufacturers, right? And a usual thing, manufacturers of instruments and technology stuff like this. And the thing is that a lot of, say, musicians, a lot of artists, they want to get at them. They want to talk to them about, hey, you have this new gear or whatever. I mean, sometimes the company, they'll wait until a particular person seems like the right person to represent them, because maybe they have some star power or something, or they just got off this big tour, or they just did a special on CBS or something, whatever it is. And they reach out to somebody like that. Sometimes it happens like that, but most of the time, the way it happens is the artist is actually approaching the company, right? So, and it's become this thing where now companies are sort of turned off by the approach of a lot of artists, because they just basically just want some free stuff, right? And there's an issue about having like a mutually beneficial arrangement, like this, and they don't talk that way. They just like, hey, where's my stuff, right? So they set up these portals on their website. Hey, if you're an artist and you're interested in our product, here, email us this way. But you know what sort of small percentage of those emails they probably respond to? Maybe 1%, and the situations that I've found myself in were always the ones where somebody directly connected me to somebody. It's never when I followed the protocol, when, hey, stand in line, wait your turn, none of that stuff. That's not how it's done. You have to go directly to the people that can actually do something. And sitting around and waiting. Here's one more illustration I want to use, and then I'll I'll give you the floor. But I was earlier today. I was heading to the gym with my son, and I didn't actually work out. I had a deadline, and I actually had a grant that I'm working on, and so I was trying to give my wife a break. She'd been with my son all day. He didn't start school until Friday, and so I took him to the gym with me. And that means I get 2 hours of him playing around with the other kids and me sitting on the couch with my computer, right? And that's not the usual thing, but every once in a while, that's great in a pinch, right? So I had to get him some lunch, because he hadn't had lunch yet, which is actually, he usually would have had lunch way earlier. So I went one way on this street, and there was some construction and stuff on the, on the way, and it was like one lane traffic, it seemed like. But the way that it was situated was that there was this logged up traffic way back. But the reason it was is that people were sitting behind some cars that were off on the right side of the street. But actually, if you just drove in the middle of the street, that line ended and then you were back to regular traffic. But most people just sat there and were just waiting. And I waited for a little bit and I was like, I'm not waiting anymore. I really was going to just turn around and go find another way. But instead, I was like, once I got out there, I was like, oh, I see what's happening. And so I just kept going. And part of the time I was driving in the wrong lane. Right? It wasn't dangerous or anything like that. And it was very slow traffic anyway because it was some construction and things. But the point is that waiting in line, you think and sometimes waiting in line, you think you're waiting in the right line. You're not even in the right line, and you're not even sitting there because you're not even sitting there for the right reason. You think you're in line, you're not even in the right line. You think you should be sitting there, but actually you could have kept going and been fine. So anyhow, it's a long story, but you get it.
Yeah, that happens. That happens when interface. It's a good illustration. It happens especially when you're interfacing with bureaucracies and such, and after you spend 10 months doing something, and then this lady comes in for herself like, oh, you could have just done this in 2 days, and you're like, what? Anyways, this whole thing about direct contacting people, I'm going to just kind of take a different tangent here, add a different tangent on contacting people and negotiations. You see, there are people out there. There are certain instances where it's very beneficial for you to have a team when you're going to go negotiate something. Okay, it's this. I mean, it's very obvious, right? You can be like King Leonidas as portrayed in 300 and go alone to Xerxes and his crew, because you're Leonidas, you got that kind of gravitas. But generally speaking, it's good to have gravitas more than yourself around. That's why people like to say things like, well, we have combined 400 years of experience, that kind of crap, right? People like to say stuff like that, and it actually is effective. So what am I getting at? There's certain things, like let's say, for example, you want to buy a business and you're forming some kind of a consortium to buy this business, and you need to go to a bank to ask them for a loan. What you need is, some kind of a business organization with a board, let's say. And it's best if this board contains people that are, respected in the business. So hey, I have this person who used to be former CFO of X, Y, and Z. Like, startups do this, right? So the idea of to kind of make this concept that I'm talking about more clear in terms of understanding or creating somewhat scene where this type of thing happens is startups create a business and then they get venture capital funding. That's important to them. But another thing that's important to them is people in their boards. Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, the lady who sold the fake blood stuff. I don't know if you remember that, Dr. Thunder, or you guys listened to in the chat. But Elizabeth Holmes was famous for selling she was a fake Steve Jobs person wearing turtlenecks, selling fake blood machines, right? She had Henry Kissinger and all kinds of crazy people in her board, right? To this whole kind of gravitas point, right? So you can get these types of people to be parts of some kinds of a board of some kind of consortium that you're creating simply by calling them, is my point. And I've seen this done. And as a matter of fact, I have done this as well, where I need to do something because who's this person you're calling and you're just going to hop on your board? Well, there are many people out there who've been competent their whole lives. They've done good things. They've ended up in nice positions as vice president of the XYZ portion of JP Morgan or whatever, right? And their whole time they've not really been, as is the case, they haven't really met. It's far between that it's lonely at the top, let's say. It's few and far between that you meet people whom are competent and trying to climb and grind, right? So when they get a call, right, that hey, my name is Dr. Thunder. I'm forming an XYZ. I would like to talk to you about being in a board that I'm creating, which doesn't take much away from them. No, it tickles the ego. Or imagine you, Dr. Thunder. Somebody calls you and says, "Hey, I would like you to be in a board of something," right? Because you have this vast experience, and of course, here's what's in it for you, right? If we're able to secure this stuff, you get like X percentage of whatever and we would like your expertise in X, Y, and Z, right? You're not gonna like snare at or jeer at that, right? You're gonna be like, hey, you know what? Especially if again the person is competent and they're grinding, and you're like, hey, I see you, and oh, you see me too. Cool. I'll join this team, and then now this person has you in their team. When they go to that bank, they're like, hey, I'm not just some little dude here trying to get this money to buy this business. I have experts in this field. The field that I'm talking about in particular that I have experience with is the elder care slash hospice space. Okay, where you have all these different facilities ranging from the bedpan, low end, um, all the way up to luxury elderly living, right? And you have all these kind of small businesses that people tend to like, it's just in the family run, right, or individual run. And sometimes you have to, what I mean is you can buy them and group them together, get some kind of efficiencies and all those kinds of things going, okay? And the way you do that is, you get loans to buy businesses, and then that way, and you tell the bank that, hey, this is the business, this is the cash flow in the business. Cash flow can obviously cover debt service and more, right? But why should the bank trust that you are a person that can gather up these businesses, do a mergers and acquisition effectively, right? Why should they trust? But you have these people in your board, and you can simply reach out and call them, and they can be in your team. That's my long, convoluted way of saying that. Look, vis-a-vis negotiations, having a team is sometimes very important to bring gravitas. Oh, but I don't know these people, and I'm not white, or whatever it is you may want to say. Okay. It's, trust me, the people who are sitting, they would love to have that phone call. And it doesn't care if it's a green person that calls them. If they see what they should see in you, which is the grind and that you know what you're talking about, they'll hop in there and sign their name there and guide you along. They want to help. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. The lonely at the top thing that really rings true. Um, you know, in you recognize a certain you recognize the same thing in somebody else. You know, you recognize that hustle. You can tell if it's phony, baloney, or uh, and something else that comes to mind too is because I think that it's too often that people have these opportunities to meet with somebody that's of significance, but they screw it up because they're not ready.
Hmm.
And that might be the worst thing you can do because you're not going to get another shot at it.
Hmm.
And it's better to wait until you're actually ready and then approach it than to try to, you know, force it. You're not ready. You look like you're not ready. You look like you didn't take it seriously. You know, you're doing like one of these things like you haven't done the requisite research, so you're asking dumb questions or you're saying dumb things, in their presence, and it's like, why did I even give this, you know, this dusty ninja meeting?
Hmm. Shout out to Dan Pena. He talks about something similar where it's about getting people on the board so that you can then use them for to pitch something to a bank. And I recall somebody screwing up in exactly the manner you talked about. And then he gave this talk of like, of course, you don't go directly to the Howard Schultz or whatever first. You got to practice with like, Joe Schmo,
Right.
the local whatever guy here, get him to go to the bank with you, and you guys, get a few licks in and all that kind of stuff before you screw everything up. So yeah, 100%.
Um, Keith Newton, shout out to Keith, has a question here. He says, "Hey, what are good techniques for finding those key persons' phone numbers or email to contact them?"
Okay. So number one, you'll be surprised how many people simply just have a LinkedIn. Okay. That's one thing. Number two, you can pay people to do this kind of research for you. Shout out to what he was talking about, Fiverr, okay? Or you can have somebody in your team. I have someone loosely in the marketing department. They're in charge of the marketing department. My whole marketing department is a person of one. Okay. And they're typically the person that kind of does this type of thing. Okay. It's like, okay, I'm looking for this particular contact, how to get to this particular person. And typically it's a puzzle. And typically you have to do 2 steps. Typically you're not just going to get the CEO's number, direct his little pager thing that goes off whenever. Like, no, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get the bat phone immediately, no. But however, simply by calling, because this person will know, like, oh, so now I tell, hey, Mr. Let's just call him W. Mr. W, I need to find out how to contact the CEO of such and such a company. There's so many ways you can start to poke at this company. And one of the most interesting things is if you literally call, you can find out a whole lot of things, right? Oh, you just called, you called the receptionist, and you found out a couple of this, that, and the other, right? Without just, you don't call the receptionist and say, I want the number for the CEO. No, okay? You have to build a game plan. Okay, now the particular game plan, I don't think is important because it's going to be dependent on the particular kind of ladder you're climbing. But it's a ladder structure. You're going from piece to piece to piece to piece. You're not just saying, hey, I want the CEO's phone number. Okay. So you start with LinkedIn. What can I find in LinkedIn? Okay, they have this address, they have this, oh, they have this phone number. I call this phone number. I find out, oh, it's this kind of it's this type of an office. I'm calling that phone number to find out what exactly is this location, who shows up there, and do they have actual offices there? So, oh, now I found out. So who's actually located there, blah, blah, blah. And then you might get to the point where now you got the assistant to the CEO's phone number, and that might be good enough. Okay. But to answer Mr. Keith's question again, basically, you can pay people to do this research. And sometimes you simply have to go to LinkedIn and you can find people. Now, then there's the numbers game. Before you find one of these people to actually maybe take you seriously, you were talking earlier about people getting thousands of emails, right? Let's say you're just at the email level and the LinkedIn level. You don't necessarily have some kind of trusted recommender, such as the assistant to the CEO, who is not ready to recommend you because you've had this whole chain of recommendations because of your crazy research. Then it's just a numbers game. You're going to be emailing many people off of their LinkedIn, right? And yes, they get hundreds of requests like this, but you might get lucky in that regard to get in touch with such a person. But I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I think that was great advice and well thought out. I mean, you may have done that a few times. All right, let's see here. Let's see. Leverage.
Let me tell you what I mean by leverage. Leverage is knowing who has the leverage. I've seen people negotiate with people as if they have the power and they don't. Let me explain. So let's just say me and a bank are having a problem here together. The bank has given me $50 million for my business, okay? The bank is absolutely upset with me. We want our $50 million, we've given you $50 million, and this is our $50 million. If they push me to the edge, I can file bankruptcy, they'll lose $50 million. So they need to understand leverage there. They need to make sure I stay in business, because if I stay in business, I can pay them back. That is leverage right there. So you need to know your position of leverage, not just necessarily going in there and pounding your fist on the table and saying, this is what I demand from you. If you don't have proper leverage, it will work against you. Number 6.
Now, this is an interesting way that he frames leverage. Leverage is one of the topics that we've talked about frequently, in this series. Not in this series, in Getting Ish Done. We've talked about it frequently. It's usually using, perhaps something like using a job offer against a current job to get them to pay you more. I mean, that's a standard reference leverage tactic, right? Mm-hmm. But what it is that he's talking about is a little more nuanced than that, right? So knowing who actually has the power, control of a certain situation, and not wasting your breath on someone that can't actually do anything. It's kind of like finding the right person to have the conversation with.
Yeah, so this is one of those things that's kind of very well mapped out, generally speaking, in different snake oil salesman systems, right? But there's something called the champion within. Let's say you're doing enterprise selling. You're selling to a particular business. You're trying to convince somebody within an organization, right, to do something. Or let me put it this way: you're trying to convince the organization to do something, right? You're trying to get um, JLM Music to start using your service. JLM Music is a organization or a company. There are many people involved in it, and you go and you give a pitch, and you have this person that's really excited about the problem that you're trying to solve. They understand the problem. They're like, oh, you know what? You're great, Dr. Thunder, right? And you start getting excited, right? Because you think, oh, I thought, this JLM loves us,
Man.
blah blah blah. So typically, that might be a champion, and typically the champion is rarely the decision maker. The champion is somebody who understands.
100%.
Typically, yeah, typically maybe the champion is often a user of this product you're selling. You're here to sell some new software of how they're going to do accounting, right? And the head of accounting is happy about it, but he's not actually responsible for signing those checks. It's the CFO/CEO, someone else in the C-suite, not just the head of
Right.
the accountants, right? So this idea is having a champion is a place where people tend to, because it's you want to. So here's what a lot of salespeople, because they're lazy and because they get excited, they want to talk to people whom they know and whom they're going to get a good reaction from. They keep talking to the champion, and the champion keeps saying things like, "Oh, it's in the process," or whatever it is, because even the champion doesn't necessarily know how to buy things. What you'll find out is companies are made up of individuals, and there's a lot of times there's very little institutional knowledge, especially in the area of how the company actually acquires certain things. So it's like, what is the actual process? Who has to sign off on it? Does legal have to sign off on it? How about the accounting department? How do we actually even generate these types of invoice? Can we pay the champion doesn't know any of that, okay, right? But the champion might just be, because they're also nice. They're like, oh, you know what? I'm talking to the right people, or blah blah blah. So, point being, you have to recognize that there are champions, and then there are decision makers. And then there are end users, and all these kinds of things. And it is rare that all these three are the same person. So you have to know who that decision maker is, and you need to be pushing closer and closer to that. Sometimes the champion doesn't want you to know, or because they don't really, because maybe they're not even authorized to be having that conversation, right? The champion is actually
Yep.
not authorized to be talking to you about that kind of stuff, and they don't want you to go spill the beans about what they're saying. But unfortunately, you got to go around them. You got to find out who the actual decision maker is, and they're protected somewhere, in a chamber guarded by gatekeepers, such that you don't get to them for good reason, right?
So it's what came to mind is two separate sort of illustrations. So one is like, you show up to a particular place and you don't, you're talking, you're having a conversation with someone and they're big up and stuff, and they're telling you they think, oh yeah, this is a sure thing and blah blah blah. And then you find out that that guy that you've been talking to is the janitor, right? And nothing against janitors, no shade against janitor, but we know that a janitor is not going to be the person that it matters if they're celebrating you or not. And then the other thing that came to mind is like, so um, so you decide that you would like to choose a life of crime, and you happen to have one of your old buddies is talking about, you know, and he's been kind of in and out of jail. He's he's been vetted by the mob or by whoever's selling the drugs or whatever. It's obvious I know a lot about this. I'm using the right lingo and everything, right? And so, so So what happens is your friend is telling you, "Oh yeah, they'd love to have you. Oh, such and such is great. Oh, they're such a great, and they're about to make power moves, man. You can make a lot of money." And they talk you into it, and you're like, "Okay, let me go on and do this." So you show up, in the cover of darkness and all like this, and some abandoned warehouse, and cats show up. Then you find out that this is the dude that nobody likes in the organization. That's the guy that's supposed to be vouching for you. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it's not good.
That ain't gonna work. All right. Let's keep going.
Not listening, it's pretty simple. Sometimes the whole thing about misinterpretation, the more you listen, you'll start seeing signs and you'll start seeing exactly what's important to them, and you'll start seeing what they're not willing to negotiate with, and that'll help you get to the final decision sooner. Number 7, knowing when to walk away.
Oh, dude, that was super short. Let me do that again because I almost missed what he said.
Proper leverage, it will work against you. Number 6, not listening, it's pretty simple. Sometimes the whole thing about misinterpretation, the more you listen, you'll start seeing signs and you'll start seeing exactly what's important to them, and you'll start seeing what they're not willing to negotiate with, and that'll help you get to the final decision sooner.
Okay, now that's a really simple and seems like pretty direct one. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No. I mean, it's almost like, well, it's as close as you can get to repeating number 1, which was not understanding the other person's position. It's like, well, it's like, oh yeah, let me add this for you. 1, you literally didn't listen. Okay, sure. Okay, great.
Right.
All right. No, yeah.
Go to the next one.
Number 7, knowing when to walk away and when not to walk away. I will tell you from personal mistakes, I have sometimes walked away way too early and it cost me millions of dollars. And I have sometimes walked away too late and it cost me a lot of hours, okay? From experience, you'll generally make this thing tighter where you'll be able to save more money, make more money, and save more time and make more time to do other things. But there are times where you're into it and you may not like somebody, or you may not like something that was said, but that doesn't mean you're not going to do business with them. Unpeel it a little bit more, and all of a sudden, something could happen. There's sometimes patience is important. Many times you can tell a deal and say, look, we were just doing a deal, and I told the guy, I said, listen, I want to do this deal, but I'm not going to do it based on these guidelines. If you have something better, honestly, go. I'm just here waiting. If you want to do something like this, I'm open. Then we came back 2 months later and we ended up doing a deal because we were patient about it. So you need to know your position where you're at with that. Number 8.
Okay. So knowing when to walk away and when not to. Okay, so remember I this was how long ago was this? This could have been a couple months ago. I think it was a couple months ago. And I was telling a story about walking away from a particular opportunity, framed as an opportunity. Dealing with somebody that was really difficult and deciding that the money was not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to give them some chances, to show me that maybe I was wrong about, things. And I gave them some time, but at least I was able to get out before any sort of contractual thing was actually struck. Now he's talking about millions of dollars. I'm talking about, it ain't millions of dollars I'm talking about. But the amount of time and energy I would have had involved with that would have been a colossal waste. And so cutting it off in the beginning was a better choice for me.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think about what he was saying?
Oh yeah, know when to walk away. Wasting time. Look, this is something that slows people down a great deal. I know that it is not everyone's forte. Not everybody has everything nailed down. One of the types of like deficiencies that I mentioned is I'm not the guy that's going to be, even if I knew that you love baseball and whatnot, not the guy that's going to be best at bringing it up. I could fake it a couple of times or whatever. Not going to be the best guy at bringing it up and having a conversation with you about it and having that kind of heart to heart connection on that level. So but I don't go ahead thinking that that's a completely useless thing. It doesn't exist in the world and it has no bearing whatsoever in influencing people. No, that's stupid. Of course, it's very important in the world of influencing people. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try to maybe hone that skill or bring other people in. Now, why do I say that? I'm talking about that there is a skill involved in being able to see conclusions quickly. In other words, see that something is not really going to go anywhere, right? Like, and know it. It is a skill because I've observed people not have it, not see it, not know that something that, oh, this is not going to go anywhere. This person you should stop wasting time with, okay? Or if you're going to be wasting time with this person, put them in a rotation far out in the radius there of your follow-up rotation that takes the least amount of effort because it's worth it, and maybe in 3 years something may come out of it, right? That kind of a thing. So there are all these different positions, or this other thing should be right here, dead center, close orbit, front burner. Put all your energy into it, right? People don't know how to make these kinds of gradations of these different orbits of what you should be paying attention. Front burner, back burner type of a situation. Hence, have someone in your team to augment that particular deficiency, right? So I talked about having people in my team that can do X, Y, and Z that I don't have. If you're the person that need you, I don't know if you have this experience, Dr. Thunder, but there are people who just want to go back to a particular well over and over and over again, or seem to want to but if and there what if certain types of things to death, and I just see like, hey, you know what, this guy's not ready to buy, or this is not going to work out right now. Let's revisit it. If you notice that about people.
Yeah. Um, the thing that was going that occurred to me, well, that started I started hearing in my head is you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. You
Mm-hmm.
know, uh, don't count your money. You know, when you're sitting at the table. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of truth to that whole kind of timing thing. I've sort of been um, I have sort of been sort of resistant to certain issues of timing as far as fully incorporating them into conduct. Uh, how can I say this so it makes sense? Um, I recognize that timing is important,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a time for this, there's a time for that, um, and your outcome can be dramatically different if you choose the right timing. Right? I'm aware of that, but part of me doesn't like that um, because it seems like you're sort of coddling someone's sense of it. You,
Mm-hmm.
coddling is not exactly right. It seems to me like if something is a good deal, if something is a good situation, then all parties involved should be able to recognize that that's the case, no matter what the timing is. Now, it might be that you can't pull the trigger yet, but it seems like there would be like at least an agreement that yeah, this is a good situation. I don't know if what it is that I'm saying makes any sense.
That makes sense. You don't want to the context that you're describing. Okay, something is good for them. Okay, and you say they should recognize it. Now you know that that should there,
Yeah.
is doing a lot of work, and that is rather crazy. That they, of course, they do not, right, in fact, recognize it, and that you don't wish to acquiesce to this illogical situation. It's illogical from a timing perspective. Yeah, so I get it. It's logical from that. You choose to stay at a high level with a low resolution, and hence it's illogical because there is a logic perhaps to their. It could just be let's give some very basic logics as to why people take time to do things, right? A very generous interpretation is just the whole point of digesting, right? Right. That's the perhaps the most generous one where it's like, okay, somebody just has to let things sink in, let them just take a week to sleep on it, right? Those kinds of things, right? Like, and in other words, zooming in and say, okay, that's the logic of it, and then also all from that all the way to all kinds of convoluted emotional things, okay, that have a logic of their own. That may be the reason why you want to, but some of that may not be worth it. That there's some people who have the idea of, oh, I should be able to close anything, I should be able to solve every problem. It's like, yeah, with infinite resources and time, or maybe you could torture them and force them into, but is that worth it? um this is not some kind of ego game here of I need to close everybody, I need to convince everybody now. But yes, I understand what you're saying regarding I want to acquiesce to the illogical situation whereby people are not seeing what's good for them, right? And then you may just kind of have to decide, well, what is the reason why this is happening? Is it something I can tackle now? Something I can tackle later? Again, I always say that there's something people are not telling you as to why they're not doing something. Okay, and when you just look at it from their perspective, it makes perfect sense. You don't want to tell people that something that will give them the edge over you. So you, Dr. Thunder, I'm trying to sell you something. You, Dr. Thunder, are actually thinking, what? I don't think I'll be able to pull this off. As in, I don't think I'm going to use this tool. Or, I don't actually believe what Ike is telling me right now. But you're not necessarily going to say that, okay, to me, right? One makes you look like you're flaky. The other one makes you look like, okay, blah, blah, blah. But we know in reality, these are the kinds of things that are actually occurring in your head when you tell me, you know what, Ike, I just have to think about it, right? I just have to think about it means I don't really know if it'll work. Ike, I don't really believe you about this thing. All these other things. So people typically don't tell you what's going on. So you have to dig, and if you find the actual granule of what's really causing them, then it's easy to know, okay, is it movable or not. I hope that makes sense. I've repeated it again from previous times and also in this show, that when it comes to objections, reasons people are giving you why they don't want to do something, they rarely ever tell you the real one. And it's not because they're trying to be bad or just hide things. It's because the real one is an emotional and personal reason that will then be it makes them vulnerable. It's like you want them to really tell you that you're scared of what your wife will say. That's why you don't want to make this transaction right now. They're not going to tell you that, but they're all anyways. That's it.
Right. 100%. Um, so I don't think I want to go past 7.
Oh,
We've got 7 more points. I think that's going to be a good episode for next week. So instead, I thought that what we could do is we could sort of recap a few thoughts about each point, and then that'll be about our time by the time we get done doing that. So going back to point 1, and actually I'm just going to show his writing on the board here because we can get point 1 to 6 there. So number 1 is letting your emotions get the best of you.
hmm hmm And again, this one I think was all about control. Was there anything else that you think? Um, what's the meta knowledge here? Uh, Understanding how to be in control. Uh, Therefore, practicing and being a master of the craft. Okay. Now this may not be a job for you because the way I'm describing it is almost like, oh, negotiation is a full-time job. Like, that's why I'm kind of describing it because um, tends to be more that way for me. That negotiation is, well, something that seems looks like negotiation is a full-time job. But there are many instances where even in your, let's say, relationship with a spouse or let's say your children, where understanding that communication is a skill can go a long way. There's certain types of people that don't like to look at things as skills because they think it takes the spontaneity and the juice out of it, right? Uh, Ultimately, these people end up having to learn these skills by paying a therapist, and they just call it something different. They call it their healing journey or whatever, right? And if it's put in the right kind of words, they don't mind learning these communication skills such that they don't lose control and act like a d bag all the time, right? So
Hmm.
even if it's in the relationship with family, which is a full time job and which is going to occupy a lot of time, these types of skills of understanding how communication works and knowing that it is okay to prepare for a conversation, right? It just doesn't have to be like, oh, I prepare for conversations when it has to do with money. Well, if money is the only thing that's important to you, like it's basically what you're saying, right? If I'm not gonna think about prepare about conversations to have with my son, but oh, if it's money, everything else I just wing it, and then sometimes I lose control and whatever. But anyways, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, this your emotions, letting your emotions get the best of you. Um, I mean, if we're honest, there are certain cultures of people. There's certain stereotypes about certain people where letting their emotions get the best of them is a seems to be like a usual or an expected sort of outcome. Certain people are just known for being in certain, even I would say, stereotypes of cultures of people are known to be sort of hotheads. Um, and this is actually one of the ways where if multiculturalism was actually a thing, right? In other words, if it was actually authentic, if it was actually earnest, uh, if the sort of purpose of it, what the title seems for it to be, a lot of people interacting, interfacing, potential for to learn from people, to look at other cultures and say, hey, this is a really good quality of this culture. In my own culture, this is not that good. It's not that good, so I'm going to emulate this other. It could be an opportunity to do something like that, or to reflect on some, just basic strengths and weaknesses of different things, and be willing to acknowledge that. Um, it seems like it would be an opportunity for people to say, okay, black folks are too emotional, and that might have something to do why uh, maybe they're blowing deals because they can't control their emotions, right? Not all black people. I'm not like that. We understand that, but it could be something to do some reflection and say, hey, well, I've seen a certain kind of behavior modeled in my community, maybe first starting in my household and then in my community, and and that whole episode of when keeping it real goes wrong, um, where Chappelle starts telling his boss off, keeps it real, and now he's cleaning somebody's window, you know, in their car. That comes to mind, but that whole um, wearing the emotions on the sleeve, it's not. It's I mean, it's just not going to be. it's not going to benefit you. It's not going to work out. Not just in a negotiation. Of course, it sucks there, but everywhere else. And it's funny because like it's number one. It's the first thing on the list. And these Dusty Ninjas can't even get past the first thing on the list because they try to keep
Yeah,
it
you know what?
real.
It's the exact situation that you mentioned. I heard recently, and I kind of predicted what was about to happen. And then it happened. Uh,
Mm.
Speaking of this particular thing, anyways, it's something anyways, I'm not gonna toot my own horn. Let's talk about what I saw. I saw somebody give a critique from a cultural perspective. Actually, did not give, they criticized a particular group of people, okay, for something. Okay, they gave a whole kind of exegesis. Oh, here's why this happens. And then the person responded by saying, "Well, we're not white," right? That kind, you know that thing, right? Where it's like, "Oh well,
Right.
you just mentioned white things," and it's disingenuous, right? Because it's like, no, those are not white things because you can see these things in many different places, okay? In things that work, or you could call it maybe things that work in a certain way, and it's not just a white thing. To then, I'm gonna now be authentically black. I'm gonna keep it real, and I'm gonna tell you how I'm not white, right? And it
Ah,
becomes performative too. You've seen that kind of thing happen, right? Where
right.
now I'm really gonna show you that I'm not a white guy. You know.
Praise the Lord. Wu Tang.
Wu Tang forever.
All right. All right. So then number two, uh, what is it? Misin- Misinterpretation of a position. So it seems again, it's like it's layering in on number one. You're such a hothead that you're going to allow some goofy misinterpretation of something. You're going to make it, you know, you're going to make it, you're going to let it throw you over the edge, you know. Oh, goodness. Throw you over the edge and keep it real. So that was a little bit you had a different sort of nuance on this point. I just saw it as almost just like a direct repetition of number one.
Oh
What do
yeah,
you
so
think?
direct representation of number one, and that's why I then took it somewhere else. I was like, okay, since if we're gonna be talking about this, let's talk about how to interpret positions. Um, it's a useful skill to have. Now, well, typically, a lot of ways, it's just talking about intelligence, right? Intelligence is, kind of generally speaking, and how it's measured, the ability to kind of manipulate mental objects. Sometimes they're symbols, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're actually spatial objects, like actually moving objects in your head, like literally, okay? Which happens to be what a lot of math is, by the way. People never really tell people what math is, and that's why 90% of people hate math because nobody really. It's hard to find math teachers or math people who actually know what the hell math is. But anyways, the whole point is being able to take apart something such as a person's position, break it into constituent parts, and see that you can rearrange it. And oh, why how could you possibly rearrange something that somebody has told you? It's because they're not telling you the full picture, right? My whole point about sales number one. People are not, whenever they tell you why they don't want something, it's not the real reason. Okay. So the whole point is understanding the position and understanding how to break it into constituent parts, rearranging it in terms that are favorable to you, and typically by putting them into some kind of a future and such. So I completely negated his point and made a different point.
Right. Number three, I liked research. I liked that one, and I liked his rather organic plug of his discount code for Fiverr, where he said basically, you don't have any excuse for not knowing. And matter of fact, even if you don't have enough time to do it, you can pay somebody to do it. And now I'm going to help you to save money doing that, so I don't want to hear that excuse again. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that was
Mm-hmm.
the fine print there. But I liked it because by just learning more about who it is that you're dealing with, you can prevent yourself from getting in a really bad situation, and or I mean, you can learn something about the person, even some biographical stuff about the person that can help you to say the right things. You know, and that could mean something. I remember I was in a now you know I'm not the pseudo spiritual dude. You know, I'm Christian and stuff like this, right? But I'm not expecting some mystical magical stuff to happen, which you know this. I'm just that's not the way I function. And that's not to say that I'm not able to acknowledge when things have happened that obviously, I mean, that when I look back, it's obvious that there was something else that was going on that that can't be explained, at least not simply can't be explained, other than perhaps a mystical interaction with, you know, aspects of my reality that made a difference in a way that I needed at that point. So I'm not going to spell that away and say that's not the case, but I also am not running around looking for it. Right? What is it? What does the Bible say? An adulterous people goes looking for a sign. I need a sign that God is real. I need a miracle. I need something to happen right now. Lord, if you do this for me right now, I'll live right. That just doesn't tend to be my approach, you know. But I'll tell you, man, um, I was in a job interview, and this is years ago. Man, this is like ancient history. Um, oh, this is a long time ago. So this had to be 12, 13 years ago. It was a long time ago. It was a long time ago. I was interviewing for a position. It was a church gig, and by the way, when I applied for this job, it's at a big church. Um, the job was a full time position, but I didn't want a full time position. So
Mm-hmm.
my plan was I'm gonna go in here. I'm gonna meet the folks. I'm gonna have my talk with them, and they're gonna see that yeah, this cat could do this, and he doesn't need to be full time, right? So I was gonna talk them into something else. Well, it turns out
Mm-hmm.
that they were kind of thinking the same thing. They had posted the position as a full time position, but they had sort of decided at some point that they were going to make the job sort of a three-headed monster, as it were, but without the
Mm-hmm.
monster aspect. They were going to change it so that it was kind of three main people, or three or four people, kind of carrying the load as opposed to just one person. And so that was something that I was actually able to do. I wasn't going to leave my, you know, tenured professorship for that. I mean, that wouldn't make any sense. I wasn't going to do that. And I couldn't do a full time job, so we negotiated like this. And I remember in the meeting, I remember using an expression in my speech pattern that was not an expression that I recall myself using prior, but it just seemed like something to say. I don't know why, but I said this expression, this both and. I was describing something, and I said both and, you know, this kind of thing. And it was interesting because although I hadn't listened to enough of the the senior pastor's sermons. I listened to enough so that I knew that it wasn't going to be some debaucherous stuff that I have to like quit the gig like after the first Sunday. I listened to enough for that, but I didn't listen to like, an exhaustive amount so I could hear him say this. But apparently this is an expression this guy used all the time. And matter of fact, he had written a book, Both And. Was the name of the book. Now I didn't realize this at all. And I'm not saying, I'm saying that I know that I didn't know that. And that was not an expression that I used at all. And I didn't know the book. I didn't know any of that stuff, but it was very useful that I said that in the context of that meeting. And I'm sure that that had an impact on their final decision. Right? Now,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say again. I'm not looking for a sign. It ain't that. But you have to be like, well, I don't know. Maybe there is something to this, right? But how much the better it would have been, because that's not something that you can't depend on what happened. What just happened, what happened in my situation, you can't depend on that.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can do research so you can create those scenarios, at least in their mind. Right? And that can make all the difference.
Yeah, not bad. It's a nice synchronicity there on noticing that stuff.
Let's see here. Going to the source. You want to talk a little bit about going to the source?
Oh yeah, going to the source. I think it makes perfect sense. It's part of the understanding bag, right? If I were to take his 14 piece things here, which by the time we get to number 14, perhaps I will have done what I'm about to say right now. In terms of categorizing them, there is a part of it which has to do with the understanding, right? So understanding number one, even number one, I'll take into as understanding, right? Because I said that look, it's basically about being in control, and you have to understand this thing as a game and such in order to be in control. And then number two, same thing. Same thing with just going also to the source is also, in terms of getting information. But then I took some liberty to expound upon it and say that it is easy to get to people, because he talked about picking up the phone and calling, a CEO directly. It is not so hard to get to people for reasons that you may want to, different reasons that you may want to get to them, including getting them in your team so that you have more gravitas and such. So, but going to the source, I don't know what are your thoughts on that point?
Yeah, that going to the source thing, that's when I use that illustration about, you got to be willing to like kind of cut the line and, don't go the standard route. Don't, but when you find yourself actually in this meeting using whatever relationship favors you have stored up, using whatever chits you have stored up, to get this meeting, you better be ready. You better be ready for that meeting. And it may be worse to not be ready for the meeting, than to never get the meeting in the first place. Because at least in that situation, at least you don't, at least in that situation, you don't look like a freaking idiot in front of like a freaking world, like a master of the universe. Now you just made yourself look like an idiot in front of a master of the universe. Sometimes people, when they're young, they're so hungry though. You're hungry, and it's good to be hungry, and it's good to have passion. Okay. I don't really like that word passion. okay, I don't like the word passion because it seems to be at odds with stoicism, right? So passion being okay, so for instance the the desert fathers, the monks, you know, uh, the contributors to the Philokalia, the sort of monk's manual, as it were, only seen as maybe second to the Bible, as being influential and important, especially in the early church. The Philokalia, the love of the beautiful, very dense, very rich. Like you read like one page and and then like maybe in about a month you can read another page. It's really heavy, dense stuff, and there's this sort of constant restatement of this idea of achieving a state of dispassion, right? And that, and it's not that you don't feel emotion, it's not that you don't have any emotional intelligence, it's not that you're devoid of concern for others or compassion, or that you yourself don't feel that you're worthy enough to desire to do something. It's none of those things. It's you're doing what you are supposed to be doing, and you've sort of decoded the negative aspects of passion, the ones that would maybe convince you that it's a good idea to risk it all and not be prepared in front of a master of the universe. um, and chase women, especially the chasing women part, right? That seems to be part and parcel of when people talk about
You know what?
passion. Go ahead.
The Stoic, the Epicurean, the existentialist. Now, not this is an interesting little triangle I created, I know. But the thing about passion, so let's say passion is the subject, right? Passion is the subject. We're talking about passion. We're talking about what the Stoics have to say about it, right? And then they're gonna the idea is to achieve that state, and we can kind of get it, like, okay, cool, you don't have to over explain it. People kind of understand, like, okay, cool, I want to be not in my feelings and not in my head. I want to be sort of somewhat in that state where it's control. I'm controlled. I understand that this comes with part of it is discernment, which is to understand the things that I can control, the things I cannot control, all these kinds of stuff, right? And then part of it definitely is a question of self mastery. I have to master myself, right? And then there's a question of well, what's natural, okay, versus unnatural. Because some would say, well, if you're stoic, then why are you trying to block things that are natural? Things are, if it's passion, isn't passion natural, right? And then you get yourself into kind of a logical quandary because you're thinking too linear. Now, the reason I say all that is because passion in and of itself is a non-linear thing. And by that, by non-linear, I mean that it's not the case that you can make simple statements about how it works. Like, okay, if you want to reduce passion, just keep on increasing X. If you add more of this ingredient, passion will go down. It's like, no, it may do a little circle on you and come backwards and bite you in the butt. Passion and the control of it, for example, is one of those things that could be subject to what is called, maybe if you repress things too much, it comes out and explodes on you, that kind of stuff. These types of non-linearities is what I'm talking about. Well, now, why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this because when it comes to the actual how you treat passion, there's going to be some seeming contradictions. From the point of view of looking at absolute principles. seeming contradictions because there's going to be some give and take with regards to passion. There's going to need to be some respecting of passion and then some beating it down, right? Because you can't treat these things as linear, otherwise they'll blow up in your face, right? I was just kind of compelled to say that in the sense of, because I saw you were like, okay, I don't like that word passion because of this particular, because of the strictures of the prescriptions of Stoicism. But then we understand that passion, to be controlled, has to be uh, negotiated with almost. You must give it its due. Okay. So I just felt like adding that there.
Yeah. And passion seems to be synonymous with the heart, right? When people tell you to follow your heart, and but the Bible says that the heart is wicked and deceitful above all things. Who can know it? He who trusts in the heart is a fool. And now we understand that the Hebrews believed that the heart, when they talked about the heart, they were really talking more about sort of renal glands. That's where they believed that it's like the stomach, the passions, the sexual passions, the um and then also just the uh anger, you know, you know, intense, intense intensity or whatever you want to say, all of that stuff. And as a young person, that stuff can be your undoing pretty easily. And it's very challenging to like balance and get that stuff under control. As you get older, partially because I think that certain chemicals that are in much greater proportion are coursing through your veins when you're younger. And then also, you don't have the benefit of having lived longer to understand that the world is not going to end if this particular strong desire that you have is not satisfied. If you wait, it'll subside. You don't have the benefit of knowing to what extent that is the case. You also have the issue with I talked about this, the perception of time as being uh, based on percentages, right? Based on a reference, and the reference point is, uh, if I'm an infant, that first day of my life, that's my whole life. The second day is half of my life. The third day is 1/3, and so on. And so by sort of perception is that each day is less I don't want to say it's less significant, but it's a smaller percentage of your life. And so then when you look back, it causes you to have a different view, a different perspective on the past and on events that have transpired and the speed of which those things transpire. I kid with my son all the time. I have, when you have a kid, you realize that the true purpose of your phone, especially the kind of phones that we have with take pictures, is to take pictures of your kids. And I don't know why I didn't realize that before. That ended up being, a primary usage of the thing. It's like everything else is like secondary. Let me look at some kids' pictures of my kid, And I look at these pictures of him when he was, 6 months old or a year old, and that seems just like yesterday. But of course, it doesn't seem that way to him. To him, it seems like a super long time ago. It seems like it's like all this time has passed, and how could you think that it was like last week and stuff like this? It's because we have a different perspective. It's being affected by um, this sort of perspective of time, this sort of variable perspective of time relative to all of that. So it's kind of interesting. So I think that yeah. So achieving that state of dispassion is not for the faint of heart. Let's put it that way. All right, and we said leverage, and we had talked about leverage. Um, and if you want to say something about leverage, kind of self-explanatory, but he had a different sort of angle on leverage.
What was this angle again?
Yeah, it seemed like his angle was like, know who the person that has the power
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, so you're not talking to the janitor thinking that, you know, or in my illustration of your old buddy that did some time in the joint and now is hooked up with some drug kingpin and ropes you in, and you find out that your buddy is the one guy that nobody can stand in the organization.
Oh yeah, you gotta you can't you gotta know when your shady buddy tells you, oh yeah, I got the hookup, don't worry, yeah, you gotta know not to waste time with your shady friend from the
Right.
block or your shady cousin just because you have to talk to him at Thanksgiving and he's telling you all these plans and shooting you all these calendar invites. Yeah, you got to know when not. No, but I think that the leverage thing was fairly clear, and I think we kind of elucidated it quite clearly. Go back in the video, ladies and gentlemen, to check out that point about knowing the right type of person. And the champion, by the way, is a champion of your cause. That's why they call the champion the person that within the organization it knows and understands the problem that you're trying to solve for them, and the way the product or the solution that you're trying to sell works as well. Uh, so they're championing your cause, and they're typically a good person to have, but don't waste too much time with them. They're a stepping stone. They're a tool to have, and all these other kinds of things. But you need to get to the decision maker as soon as possible.
Yeah, and then the not listening, which was super repetitive and simple. And then the last one was knowing when to walk away and when not to. And
I'm walking
and I said
away.
something about timing in that context. Um, I know timing is important. But okay, so but time is sort of an illusion too, right? So because there is no actual past. That's not, we talk about a past, but it's not like
Unfortunately,
that.
where you might be going works both for and against your argument, right? it, it, I may be leaping a couple of stones here too far, but
Go ahead.
if you're talking about you have an issue with this whole timing thing, then you shouldn't have an issue with it if time is not real, right? Like if time, the way I kind of look at it, like, well, if time is all a
Oh, right,
construct,
right. I see.
yeah, then let the whole thing happen. And why are you worried about so yeah.
I see. I get that. That makes
I
sense.
tend to, but it is an interesting thing that you bring up though, because people's relationship with time and chaos is a key part of what people uh, consider happiness or not happiness, right? Even
Yeah.
consider joy or not joy, or consider or a life lived well versus not. It also ties to your dispassionate state thing, because time is filled with chaos. Because time is change, right? In the sense that so one of the simple ways of talking about the fact that there is no such thing as time is that time, if you notice, okay, is is an observation of change. Okay. Or what do
Right.
you mean by that? Well, it's the sunrise and the sun setting. Okay. Things changed. If nothing changed, Okay, as a matter of fact, go down to absolute zero temperature, no atom moving, boom, entropy, blah, all that stuff, right? Then you start questioning, well, what exactly is this time thing? It's a movement. There is space and then there's motion and there's change within these parameters, and then there's this thing called time. Okay, the time to traverse, blah blah. And even Einstein has told us that all three of them are actually interactive, such that you can't even have an absolute time, right? Because objects that are changing and energy that is changing is warping space time itself. So yes, 100% we understand that. But from our experience, it's chaotic, right? Change brings chaos. And your relationship with that, in other words, how you view it, how comfortable are you with it, how stoic can you be in the face of all this chaos, is a very key ingredient to success and or happiness, what people call happiness, right? So it's something that it is definitely a huge thing for me in my whole kind of subjective consciousness shaman world type stuff, in terms of like how you really take the word. You were talking about synchronicities and certain things that okay you don't look for in the world, okay, and certain kind of magic, whatever or miracles and things like that. Now, I don't go looking for those things either, and I don't notice them per se. But this particular area is an area which, if you find yourself, if you have the right attitude towards chaos, a lot you can see a lot of things, a lot of possibilities, a lot of possible forks in the road, possibly prepare for them, and then sometimes all of a sudden you see that, oh, this thing that I thought was going to happen or maybe foresaw, blah blah blah, boom, it did happen, or it may be good or a bad thing. Okay, by the way, and then you're kind of more in flow with it, and it does kind of seem like there's something guiding you because of you have the right attitude towards chaos. Now, that sounds a little woo and a little BS. That's why it doesn't really matter, because it's a kind of a first person's perspective type thing where I'm very comfortable with the chaos that time throws. And when it comes to, for example, the timing of things, therefore, I understand that even if this person needs to maybe take their time in order to come to the realization that this thing is good for them, or B, it's not even going to happen in this whole lifetime. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with the chaos. I'm fine with with the dance. After all, as you said, it's not really real. It's a whole, you could take the whole block universe thing from the beginning all the way to the end. It all is what it is, and there's no need to get caught up in any particular a twist in the wind. Now I got flowery at the end there and maybe a little obtuse or whatever, but ultimately what I'm saying is your relationship with change, which is your relationship with time, and which from our perspective is chaotic because we cannot predict everything. We can predict very little, as a matter of fact, that is meaningful to us, right? The things that tend to be meaningful to us are the things that tend to blow up in our face, including our very life itself. In other words, it could end any day, right? So your relationship with that is key. Like, how do you view time? How do you view chaos? How do you view change? And how settled are you with it in a stoical way? Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, totally it. The So this whole thing about time travel and the speculation about time travel in the supposed science based on time travel can't really be any science really, because it's not something that actually exists. It's not like you could actually go back to an earlier time, because time is really just about tracking change. And since all of the things have changed and all the variables have changed, there's no getting back to that point. But I think people's interest in time travel, um, it seems to be an acknowledgement of regret. It seems to be an exploration in regret. What if I could get back to there? And I think that's what makes it so, um, like, so appealing, or why it captures the imagination. What if I could do this one thing differently? This one big mistake I made, which I've always been, I've felt insecure about for my whole life or whatever. And unfortunately, when we do that, uh, we're also not taking full advantage of what we could be doing now, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
now we'll end up being the past and potentially could be something again that's regretted. So
Yeah.
it's just an interesting thing that pseudoscience associated with time travel really is an exploration of regret. That's really what that it seems to me that psychologically that's actually what's happening. I don't know
Yep,
what you
makes
think.
perfect sense. I think there is a movie about somebody going over and over, back to the past over and over and over again. I mean, obviously, there are many movies like that. And I don't
Right.
know the one I'm talking about right now. I actually haven't seen it either, but I was listening to a podcast where somebody was talking about going back, trying to save his friend or something. Like somebody got killed yesterday. I don't know. And you're trying and you're trying. It just came to mind, and I just wanted to say it because I think I would want to watch that movie because it seems like an interesting take on it. But trying to go back over and over again to try to save the friend. And each time you figure it out that you just can't quite, still gets, guy still gets killed every time. And you just can't stop. You're like, oh, but if I were to do this, and if I, anyways, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, 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 totally. That's but even in that movie that it was a fairly recent remake of the movie. It's got to be in the 2000s or something. Um, I think it's just called The Time Machine.
Mm.
I don't remember the title exactly. And it's all sci-fied out and stuff and everything. But even in that movie, that's like the whole central reason for even desiring to develop it is um is regret. So I regret, my spouse died. They had this disease, X, Y, and Z. If this could have happened or whatever it was, and that's what creates um, that that thing. Here, Keith is he might be telling us about. Oh, he
About the
says
movie?
that happened in the latest Flash movie. He said he couldn't stop the deaths from happening. Yeah,
Yes, it is that. I think I recall the podcast now. They were talking about Flash. Okay, cool. So maybe it wasn't the whole. It probably was not the whole focus of the of the movie then, if it was a Flash movie. But that sounds interesting. Trying to save. I'm assuming some of his superhero buddies died or something. Um,
yeah, something or his mother or something like that. Because
got it.
the Flash, his mom dies, but
Oh,
his
really?
mom died. So in one telling of this, his mom dying is directly linked to him becoming the Flash. Like
Mm.
it's like you don't get one without the other. And I think in one of the um man, I used to watch the CWDC stuff.
Uh huh.
I used to be all about that, and they just got way too pushy with all of the social reengineering stuff. And I was like, man, I just want to see, like, you know somebody blast somebody with lasers coming out of their hands and stuff. That's why I'm that's why I want to see it, right? Not for this all of this other crap. And it just mucked everything up, and I had to stop watching. But and I hated that too, because uh one of my favorite film scorers, Blake Neely, who film scored all of those shows. And those
Mm.
shows are like they're like 45-minute episodes, and like the freaking um uh the freaking what was I the music is the whole episode. and it's like all these action sequences, and Neely is killing. He's a great writer, and he has a really, it's his writing. Like he has like a style of writing that you just know it's him, and it's an interesting sort of synthesis between sort of the sort of orchestral thing and like synthesized sound. Like he just has his own sound. He's killing. It's my dude. Wait a minute. So Keith is saying, okay, so Flash's mom dies. He goes back in time to stop it, change history, makes a mess, tries to save everyone. Everyone dies. He goes back in time to fix it, and everyone dies again and again. Continues till he gets back to allow his mom's death, and then Blake Neely rocks in TV show scoring. Keith Eamon, the Flash, always starts with a minor sixth arpeggio. Yep, yeah. It's get, yeah.
Keith broke it all the way down, I guess. Now I don't have to see it.
And I know Keith, by the way, and that's Dr. Keith Newton, by the way.
Oh, okay.
That's he's a terrific musician, and yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for today. I think we'll hit it up next week on your channel for common negotiating mistakes 0.8 through 14. And right, Keith says Flash and PhD are his skills. All right. All right, man. And that's our time. Peace.
Peace.